Hello, welcome to Marketing Humanity. My name is Peter, and you must be wondering, why am I talking and making your introduction today and not Gisela? Well, today's episode is titled, What's a VSCO Girl and Why Do They Matter? Well, clearly, I am not a VSCO girl, but I asked Gisela, and she said she is an expert in this particular topic. So we're going to reverse roles today, and I am going to interview her, and she's going to share some of her personal insights, thoughts, and research she's done on the Gen Z generation. So are you ready?
I am.
All right, great. So let's talk about the most obvious thing, and even for myself, to know better, what is a VSCO girl, and am I even pronouncing that correctly?
You are pronouncing it correctly. Congratulations. So a VSCO girl is an aesthetic, a trend, a meme. It's all of those things. But basically, VSCO is a editing app, kind of like Instagram, but you can categorize their aesthetic as like a beachy vibe, a more casual, not hyper edited vibe like Instagram. And so basically these Gen Z teenagers took this aesthetic and built a whole personality around it. So it's categorized by these young people wearing old school retro brands like Birkenstocks, Vans, and Crocs, and they look really good but in a really casual way. And it's also categorized by their kind of environmentally friendly stance. They have these giant hydro flasks and they put like a bunch of stickers on it. So that is the meme / trend.
Hydro flasks with stickers. I remember going to Whole Foods with my daughter, and she wanted to buy one of those things. And I said, oh, you mean the water bottle? And she rolled her eyes and says, no, it's a hydro flask. I was like, what about the color ones? No, we're gonna put stickers on them.
Yes.
And it just completely missed me, and I just realized how kind of out of tune, I'm just not getting what they're doing.
Right.
But the fact that what I really found interesting is that VSCO is actually an app. So they're naming their culture. This generation is naming things after, I guess, they're digital natives, and they're naming things after apps now.
Right. They're repositioning brands like it's their job.
I love that. So obviously we're not here to talk only about VSCO and what that is, but so let's transition a little bit and just talk about what really fascinates, I think, a lot of our listeners. For years now, we've been businesses and companies have been obsessed with millennials and the impact it has for the economy, for the future, for the workforce. Gen Z, running out of letters here, is now the next cohort to follow the post-millennial generation. So what can you share about this generation?
Yeah, so let me go to the basics of how you would characterize Gen Z. So in terms of their age, they're broadly defined as people born between 1995, which means they're currently 24 years old, and 2010, so 9 years old. So it's a huge age range. So for our viewers, I am right on the cusp between millennials and Gen Z, but then according to a BuzzFeed quiz, I'm more Gen Z. Anyways.
Zennial.
Yes. And there's a lot of people in the Gen Z generation. Statistics show almost 72 million people are part of this generation, and that's 25% of the U.S. population. And that is more than the baby boomer generation, more than millennials, so they have a huge purchasing power. And currently, Gen Z's age 16 to 21 in the U.S. spend an estimated $143 billion. And as more Gen Zs grow up, that number is just expected to rise significantly.
You know, I had no idea that Gen Z as a cohort, if you will, was actually larger than the millennial ones.
Yeah.
So I think if you were, businesses and brands were, really concerned or interested in the millennials, you really should pay attention to the Gen Z as well.
Yeah.
Especially as they, increase their purchasing power.
Right.
So, well, thank you for that. So let me ask you about what are some of the characteristics, personality traits, behavioral things that really set this generation apart, that you can kind of, give us something to identify them with.
Yeah. Let me compare Gen Zs with millennials, since that is what marketers have been fixated on for so long. basically, Gen Zs grew up in a more pessimistic time. They grew up during the recession, and look at the state of the world now.
Yeah.
I mean, they're growing up here. So I guess in terms of behaviors, Gen Zs feel more skeptical. They're a bit more pessimistic about the state of the world. Research shows that Gen Zs actually have a declining trust in companies, and they're a lot more supportive of socialism and redistributive economic policies than any of the other generations. And so as a result, there's been lots of articles and whatnot published about how ideals conscious this generation is. They shop based on their beliefs, not just the product itself. They strive to learn about what the brand's philosophy is, and then they see brands like as an extension of their beliefs. And also, we can't forget that this is the first digitally native generation, and so a lot of them are content creators. If you look at TikTok, for example, a lot of these teenagers are on these platforms where they can show their work and just create content that their peers will enjoy.
Yeah, they definitely are content creators. Like I mentioned, I have a 13-year-old daughter, and she's obsessed with just, creating short stories and publishing content.
Right.
When she was much younger, she actually created slime, how to make slime video and publish it on YouTube. I'm like, this is so fascinating to me.
Yeah, remember that study that we read that was like this generation or American Gen Zs actually want to be YouTube stars, and in other countries they want to be like astronauts and whatnot.
What does that say about this generation? That they rather be social media influencers than they want to be like astronauts. Well, that's fascinating. You know what? There's a lot to cover here, but let's take a quick break.
Okay.
And move into our brand new segment. If you guys have been following us, you know that we have this segment called Ad Limbics, which Gisela and I will watch an ad, and then we would score it. 1 being we hate it, 5 being we love it. And so what's today's ad? I think you're the one that chose it.
Yes, I chose a TikTok ad that was on TV.
Okay.
Yes.
Should
Let's
we
watch it.
All right.
You know those small moments, like finding $20 when you're running late to work, or getting that one curly fry, hearing your favorite song when you are stuck in traffic, and some moments you just can't explain. On TikTok, this kind of stuff happens every single day. Just real people, real videos that make your day. TikTok.
Cool.
So when I watched that, I got really annoyed. Even though I am not a TikTok user, I am familiar with the types of videos that are posted on TikTok, and that was not reflective whatsoever of the type of tone, the weird, quirky TikTok culture. And instead it was just weird. Like, for example, is that one curly fry supposed to be funny? Because it wasn't funny. In fact, it felt kind of insulting that they would try to summarize their brand using these really lame examples. And so if I were a TikTok user and I saw that, I would be like, wow, this company doesn't understand me.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to get into TikTok because I'm trying to monitor my child's social media behavior. But other than that, TikTok isn't something that I'm really familiar with, but I think as marketers and advertisers, we have to become more familiar with it as it emerges as a power player when it comes to social media. So I was very intrigued when I first saw this, and I can see where it's going. I also noticed that this ad, did a little bit of research on this. It was actually playing on NBA on TNT. So that alone tells you that they're trying to go mainstream with this.
Right.
It's almost like, they know their core audience, and that's why I guess you were upset, because this wasn't made for you, and maybe that's the reason why. And you look at the way it was kind of produced, the casting of it. I get what they're trying to say. It's these unexpected, quirky moments that you get in everyday life. But the people that they chose, from someone very young, someone very hip and trendy, they even had like grandmothers and mechanics, all kinds of people from all kinds of demographics and age groups really enjoying the app.
Right.
So I think their intent here was to try to promote it beyond their core Gen Z teeny bopper kind of audience to more of a mainstream audience. So I can understand why there's a connect, but I can also understand why they did it the way they did.
Let's give it a score.
Okay.
I'm just saying, if a grandma went on TikTok, she would be very
the lowest
confused.
score is a 1.
Yes.
Okay, so just be nice. One, two.
Wow, yours is so high.
Is it high? I don't think I've ever scored it anything this low.
Well, you can see my sentiment for my score. Yeah, I just really did not like the way they portrayed the app through that commercial.
I gave it, I guess I don't know what this would be from a letter grade, but it's mid of the road. It's definitely not the most amazing. It didn't really resonate. It had a happy vibe to it.
Yeah.
And I felt like it was trying a little bit too hard.
Yes.
That sense did come by that was really trying too hard to be happy, overly happy almost, when it didn't really have to. So I understand the strategy. Execution-wise, perhaps it could have taken a different path to get there.
That's so ironic because a huge part of Gen Z culture is not trying too hard.
Well, I can see why you gave it a 1.5 then. Okay, great. So let's move on to us to uncover more insights that you can share with us regarding this Gen Z generations. So as it relates to businesses, marketers that are really trying to reach this elusive kind of younger audience, what are some of the strategies or quick reminders for marketers that they should think about and consider when reaching to this audience?
Yeah, I think I would summarize everything into 4 different points.
Okay.
I think point number 1 is, it's very oversaid, but it is really crucial for brands to take a stance and be socially responsible because, as I mentioned previously, Gen Zs do see brands as an extension of their beliefs. And this generation really cares about the environment. It cares about being politically woke, etc. And so their buying decisions really go beyond product. So they'll ask questions like, does your company pay its employees well? Does your company let their employees unionize? Do they have sustainable production processes? All of these questions will factor in when they choose to buy your product or not. So that's number 1. I think number 2 is also pretty oversaid, but it's important to be authentic and be real. They take authenticity to the next level. For example, if you look at Victoria's Secret and how it has been performing pretty poorly recently, they had to cancel their annual fashion show. And instead, if you look at brands like Aerie that really promote good role models that are in all shapes and sizes in their ads and how Gen Zs flock to that brand, I think it's obvious that Gen Zs are starting to reject the whole perfect Instagram aesthetic and go for more authentic aesthetics.
Right.
And then number 3 is that they can be digitally influenced. So statistics show that Gen Zs actually, 52% of the generation find out about new products from digital influencers. If you look at how successful Kylie Jenner is in promoting her skincare line, and all of that is done through her Instagram and other social media channels, you'll see that social influencers and influencer marketing is really crucial in reaching this generation. And then number 4 is traditional still works. So there's a lot of misconceptions that Gen Zs have really short attention spans and they only text their friends instead of having face-to-face contact, but that's simply not true. Peter, you actually gave an example of how when your daughter talks to her friends, she uses FaceTime and not just texting.
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah, and I cannot imagine like a single millennial who would choose to FaceTime instead of text. And so they do have long attention spans, but good storytelling is needed to capture those attention spans. So if you look at YouTube, for example, a lot of these influencer and content producers have 20 to 30 minute videos, and it's like the norm. So the whole idea that, you only have 6 seconds to capture a Gen Z's attention is kind of false. It just requires good storytelling.
I cannot tell you the last time my 13-year-old actually watched television.
Yeah.
She's glued to YouTube as if it's her own personal entertainment station because,
Right.
and of course, we were having a normal conversation and she was talking about all her followers. She was so enthusiastic. Of course, these are all peer groups. There were anywhere from, I guess 13 all the way up to like 17.
Yeah.
And they're just normal people, high schoolers going to school, talking about their day, talking
Yeah.
about their troubles, makeup, boyfriends, etc., etc. And that just occupies her attention. So it's
Right.
very authentic. It's very, very real.
Yeah.
So that's also very fascinating. But it also sounds like they're definitely, very idealistic. Everything you talked about is very idealistic, and I remember when we were young, we're all idealistic. But let's project this out a little bit future because,
Okay.
these type of ideals can change as you mature, as you get more experience in life and
Yeah.
mature. What do you think as a consumer group that brands can look forward to in the future as this generation continues to evolve and grow as a kind of this powerful
Right.
consumer segment?
I think not only the points I mentioned before, but also brands that will succeed are brands that are designed for the now economy. We use that term all the time in our previous episodes. But for example, for this generation, they grew up where speed is key. Everything can be delivered in like an hour, or like for food at least.
Yeah, for
and
food, right.
Amazon Prime, 1-day shipping. And so it's just efficient, speed, and simplicity, I would say.
Okay.
And then, like I mentioned previously, ethical shopping will be huge with this generation. Not only is it about your company taking a stance, but actually delivering that through products. So there's been research that has shown that Gen Zs love buying secondhand clothes. And they don't like low quality cheaply produced things anymore. If you look at, for example, Forever 21 that is going bankrupt, and their whole model is quick clothes that you can
Fast
just
fashion,
get.
yeah.
Fast fashion. And then compare that to, for example, Birkenstocks that's making a comeback, and their whole model is
No, not Birkenstocks. Of all
Yeah.
the brands they choose for a comeback.
their whole model is, really durable shoes. And so it's obvious that for Gen Zs and the brands that they support, they want to maximize the value of
Yeah.
what they do end up buying.
Great. Okay, let's shift attention to the available media channels. I mean,
Okay.
there's some obvious ones, I think, being
Yeah.
digital natives. But can you share with us, last episode we talked about traditional,
Yes.
old-fashioned media channels. So for this digital native cohort, what are some of the up-and-coming or effective channels we should look at?
Right. So I guess the biggest channel right now is always going to be YouTube. It's where the influencers live. It's where anyone can become an influencer as long as you put out good content. And so there's a lot of communities that are built around YouTube. Like, for example, the beauty space is huge, especially with this younger generation. I think that Instagram is still big, but it has an uncertain future. So, for example, currently there's a huge thing with Finstas, which is fake Instagram accounts. Do you know about
I can't even pronounce the
Finstas?
word, Finstas.
Okay, well, Finstas is basically a phenomenon where someone has a public Instagram account that's highly curated, your life looks perfect on it, that anyone can follow. And then your Finsta is where your real life happens. It's a private account and only your closest friends can actually follow you.
And parents.
And no parents. But with Instagram basically changing its likes, it's hiding its likes, I think that it does have an uncertain future. And as we see from the whole VSCO girl trend, this generation is shunning how perfectly curated Instagram is. So we'll see what happens with that. And then finally, TikTok, it is a rising app. It posts relatable, humorous content that isn't perfect. It's all about being down to earth and being casual. I mean, it's like 6-second videos, and so it can't be highly curated. But in terms of kind of actionable steps that brands can use on these channels, I think it's important to, like, if you're a brand and you do go on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, it's really important to put out content that isn't self-serving.
Yeah.
That it's either very informative and gives out good information. For example, beauty vlogs that talk about the different types of products. or actually entertaining content, humorous content that people can just easily
use
engage
right away.
Yeah, exactly. And then, like I mentioned just now, good storytelling is still very important. Long form YouTube content is still very relevant. And so as long as you have good storytelling, you can go as long as you want. And then I think that finally it is important to build a community. Like you mentioned with your daughter, how she thinks that all these influencers feel like her friend.
Yeah.
Having that air of approachability and building a community from that is very important.
Thank you. So recently there's been all this kind of anti-old people movement, if you want to call it that, rebellious against the older generation.
Yes.
It's called Okay Boomer.
Yes.
Maybe I'm not saying that quite right.
Okay Boomer.
Okay Boomer. So tell me a little bit about the no-nos, kind of the, don't make these type of faux pas, which I know all marketers eventually do. They did a bunch of that with millennials. So what kind of faux pas should they avoid when it comes to this generation?
I think especially with the Okay Boomer trend, I think that kind of became popular as a response to the older generations talking down to younger generations as though they have no idea what they're talking about.
Every
that
generation
is the case.
has that, right?
But I think that for brands to succeed and not be on the front page of like that Reddit thread where you just make fun of brands and how they fail at reaching Gen Zs and millennials, I think that authenticity is definitely an overused term, but I would rephrase it to be not just authenticity, but trying too hard. So I think a lot of brands might try to emulate Gen Z humor, which is very strange, very quirky. It's really hard to come off as authentic if your whole brand voice isn't that kind of sarcastic, dry humor. But a brand that does that very well is Denny's. And if you look at their Twitter, it's hilarious. It's weird.
Denny's?
Denny's, yeah.
Okay, I have to check that out.
Yeah, and because it's so consistent with their brand image, it doesn't feel like you're pandering to this audience. And I think in terms of style itself, if your brand has an air of just like rawness and vulnerability, I think that will work very well with this generation as well. And I guess finally, for today's age, because there's such an abundance of choice, it really is crucial for brands to try something risky to stand out. Being like everyone else will never get you noticed.
It sounds like a lot of these fundamentals is what we've been talking about. So this Gen Z seems pretty wise to me when it comes to marketing that, at least here in this podcast, we're always trying to promote.
Right.
Be real, be authentic, stop talking so much about yourself, start listening a little bit more, be respectful when you join a community, understand the kind of their zeitgeist and what they're doing within, and don't try to disrupt it too much, kind of go with the flow, don't be so judgmental.
Yes.
And understand that this generation is still pretty idealistic. Who knows what they'll become when they're in their 40s.
Right.
We'll have to see. But for now, I think every young generation is idealistic. So a brand that wants to attract that needs to reflect their values.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because it's like a pessimistic type of idealism.
Pessimistic. Okay, well, I think that's a great way to end. How can I end this in a pessimistic, idealistic way? This podcast is very optimistic about marketing's future.
Yes.
And we hope that you'll tune in a pessimistic, optimistic way. And please share with us your thoughts if you're a Gen Z listening in, or if you have questions about how to better reach Gen Z. We have an in-house expert here that will try to answer your questions and provide some tips for you to be successful. So we also want to thank Sparko, which is a sponsor of this podcast. Please subscribe if you like the materials that we're putting out there. And so next episode, what are we talking about next episode? Do you remember? How can marketing turn the next recession into an opportunity? I think that's kind of my thing.
That is your thing.
Okay, so we'll hope that you tune in next time and we'll approach this topic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.